Scoring, turning back, those attacking. I actually enjoyed the challenge that football offered through I'm starting from scratch again, and I liked that. There was no pressure. The only pressure was if I'm going to be a part of this team, I don't want to let them down. I'm Mark Smith, I'm a military veteran and I'm currently playing amputee football for West Bromwich Albion. My whole upbringing, like my life revolved around football. From the age of about 7, I played sort of Sunday league, I played sort of during the week, obviously training at school, so basically every free moment I had was spent playing football. Yeah, from about sort of year 8, so about 12 years old, right up until I left at sort of 16. Yeah, I suppose sort of physically I had a bit of a rough time. But then in hindsight, I actually look at that now as the sort of moulding of me, because it made me very sort of resilient and determined. Yeah, it's certainly made me want to ensure that my own children have a much better experience of school. Yeah, obviously school played a big part in my decision to want to join the military because it offered an escape route. I could get away from, at the time, sort of Milton Keynes and almost sort of start afresh. I needed to prove to myself and to others around here, obviously that I went to school with, that there was more to me. One of the things that really sort of drove me was that, you know, I could come back, be it on leave, and I have achieved stuff. So I served with the 1st Battalion Grenadier Guards. So they're primarily an infantry regiment, so frontline soldiers when we go away on operational tours, but we have a dual role. So when we're based in England, you'll often see us outside the royal palaces carrying out ceremonial duties. So with the bearskins, the red tunics. Yeah, it's something that I look back on now and I'm very proud that I got to do that side of the job as well. But at the time it wears thin very quick. By the time I was 19, I was on my first operational tour and it felt like I was meant to be an infantry soldier. I loved being away and being around genuinely good men. I'd been serving for 8 years up to the point of being injured, and then obviously I'd still been in for another 2 years while I went through my rehabilitation. I missed the first tour the battalion had gone on to Afghanistan because we had our wedding, and seeing those lads come back, that was when we first started to take a lot of casualties, lads missing limbs, eyes, losing their lives. Then suddenly the job became a lot more serious. Everyone sort of grew up a little bit, and I know myself, like I felt a lot of guilt not going on that first Afghan tour, and so I said, come the next Afghan tour, which was due to be in 2009, I need to go, like I need to experience what they've experienced, and as a soldier I need to be able to look at myself in the mirror and know that when push comes to shove and it matters, that I can do my job. So in early 2011 I'd just finished my 2nd promotional course, so I was now a Lance Sergeant, so a section commander, so I was responsible for sort of leading 8 to 12 men. In that time of being on that course, my wife had given birth to our first child, and so there was a lot going on. And then once I'd finished the promotional course, the regiment were going to Canada to do our pre-deployment training ready for our next Afghan tour. So I was also responsible for the safety on live firing ranges. So once our 6 weeks had finished, those of us who were sort of Lance Sergeants and above were asked to stay on for another 6 weeks in Canada to oversee the ranges for the next regiment, who would also be going on that Afghan tour with us. this particular day that I was injured was a platoon attack range, and then you're looking at their tactics, their techniques, all of their procedures, how they're going through clearing. You know, you're looking for, would that person potentially have been a casualty if this was Afghanistan? So you're testing everything. And so the first position was cleared, clearing a bunker position. This then advanced on to a trench system. And after that, there were 3 compounds similar to how they are in Afghanistan. So they would clear these buildings, clear the rooms. And we'd gone through that in the morning with the first platoon. And I always sort of had a bit of a sixth sense. In Afghanistan, we went out on a particular night patrol to put in an ambush, and I remember sort of having this gut feeling that something was going to happen, and we ended up getting ambushed ourselves, and it always seemed that this sixth sense led to something, and I had that at the morning of those ranges. So we went down for the second platoon attack range in the afternoon. Same again, bunker positions were cleared, trench systems were cleared. However, unlike the morning attack, I'd only gone as far as the trench system, but in the afternoon, the section I was following became the assaulting section, so they were the first to go and clear the compounds. And so I've gone across the open ground with them. They've stacked up outside the building, so they would have gone in as pairs, clear the first room, clear the second room, and I was due to go in with the last assaulting pair for the last room. However, as the first soldier has gone in to clear the first room, I'm one side of a wall and he's the other, and the rounds have come through the wall and through the back of me. So I took 6 gunshots to my leg, so they went in through my backside and sort of came out through my groin, and then 1 up to my shoulder as well. So there was a moment of sort of confusion where we had been giving out role play casualties to sort of test their casualty evacuations and stuff. There was a delay as to whether or not I was a genuine casualty. Once obviously they realised the range was stopped, and then the safety staff that I was working with got to work at sort of treating me. The sort of realities of being hit in the leg were that the gunshots had hit my femoral artery. So for an arterial bleed, you're looking at sort of less than 4 minutes before you have completely bled out. So the lads were cracking. Obviously they'd been in that position before in sort of Iraq and Afghanistan, so they were really experienced, and they put a tourniquet above the exit wound. The exit wound itself, one of the lads had gone to apply pressure with the palm of his hand, and his hand had gone inside my leg. That's how big the exit wound was. So he had to put both of his knees on to try and sort of stem the bleeding while they put the tourniquets on. So I had 1 above and 1 below, and because it was an arterial bleed, it was obviously sort of, the blood was pumping out, so the wall from the actual compound was getting covered in my blood, and one of the lads had seen my artery and had took the decision to clamp it off, and that's ultimately what kept me alive. Without that, I would have continued to sort of bleed out. The tourniquets weren't enough to stop the bleeding. And then as I was laying there, the lads kept my leg elevated, and having done sort of different medics courses and stuff, I knew the feelings I was getting in my leg weren't great, the pins and needles, and the longer that the tourniquets were on, the more chance I had of losing the leg. And like I sort of touched on earlier, I'd not long become a dad, so I'd seen him a handful of times, so there was the thoughts of not seeing him again, and then as I was laying there, the lads were sort of playing it down and sort of telling me I'd be in the bar that night, and I started to complain about my shoulder, because they hadn't noticed about the shoulder at that point, and I said, oh, my shoulder's really, really hot, and in the end, one of the lads cut my shirt, and he was like, oh, he's been shot in the shoulder as well. And I looked across, because they wouldn't let me see my leg, but I looked across at that, and it was a relatively clean exit wound, and they just sort of packed it with hemorrhage control, and it was just a whole catalogue of things that kept going wrong. So my lung had collapsed, and then I got this sort of, overwhelmingly sort of relaxed feeling. All the pain stopped. I hadn't had any morphine because we were on a live firing range. The lads had carried tourniquets, first field dressings, but there was no pain relief. So I had this whole experience of being shot several times with no pain relief whatsoever. And then it was a real odd feeling that the pain stopped and I felt really sort of warm and relaxed. And in my mind I knew that was me dying. And I think had I embraced that, that would have been me. So one of the lads gave me a bit of a slap, sort of bring me back round and kept me talking, and then the helicopter turned up and the lads carried me on the stretcher sort of over, and at that point I mistakenly thought, that's me, I'm all right now, and I ended up sort of flatlining on the helicopter. All in all, I was gone for just over 5 minutes. So yeah, I'm very sort of lucky, obviously, to be sort of sat here talking with yourselves, because that should have been me that day. Obviously, I'm sort of living proof that defibrillators work, because they brought me back on more than one occasion. So I spent 12 days in the hospital in Calgary in Canada, and then the MOD wanted me flown back to the Queen Elizabeth Hospital in Birmingham, and then I spent, I think, a further 9 weeks there. I'd gone downhill rapidly on the flight over from Canada, and then I ended up back in intensive care when I got to Birmingham, and I kept the leg for the first 2 days, but that was starting to give me sort of organ failure, where it was dead essentially. Yeah, I was very reluctant to sort of lose the leg. They wouldn't promise that they would take the leg below the knee. I knew if I kept the knee I could stay in the military, and then my wife sort of gave me some tough love, and so then I agreed that they could take the leg. But I had actually started to pick up, started to sort of feel a bit better, but then I did have to keep going back down to surgery because they needed to take it above the infection. So yeah, where I'd hoped to be sort of below knee, I ended up being sort of mid-thigh. To this day I can still remember the very last time I played football as an able-bodied person, and that, I think that'll always stick with me. Had I known that day would be the last day I would play football able-bodied, I think they'd have had to drag me off the pitch. I'd have just played and played and played. And similarly with running, for the first couple of years of missing a leg, I longed for that like cold air feeling on my lungs. I can't walk quick enough to get that experience. So there were little things that I didn't think I would miss that I did. A lot of the lads were very driven, they knew what they wanted to do, whereas I spent my 2 years rehabilitation a little bit, that was the only thing I was lost with. And one of the things I used to spend the evenings at Headley Court doing was I'd look online at different sort of amputees around the world and things they'd done, and a few American amputee bodybuilders kept coming up. I'd sat my wife down one day when I got home from sort of working at the gym, and I was like, this isn't me. Like I've lost my purpose, and I need to put myself out my comfort zone, and it's like I keep seeing these images of amputee bodybuilders in America. Like I want to step on stage, and obviously in hospital I'd had so many operations and been nil by mouth for so long that I was really underweight, and it was like this would be the perfect bit of closure on that hospital chapter of look how far I've come. And I liked the thought of the bodybuilding, of being critiqued not for what you were missing but everything that you had left. So I'm missing 1 out of 4 limbs, but the rest of it I can still train. So I found out through looking online that there was a couple of competitions in England that included a disability class. I was very conscious at that time of not wanting to compete in the wheelchair class. I wanted to walk onto stage. But yeah, I'd ended up winning sort of 5 or 6 competitions, and the highlight for me, my first competition had gone really well down in Margate in 2014, and it had caught the eye of the head of the NPC at the time in America, and he had invited me over to Texas to come and compete. And so I booked my flights, booked my hotel. Being in America, it's like these were the lads that I had seen online whilst I was at Headley, so it was like I really want to leave a good impression. And then come March 2015 I'd flown over to Houston, and it was for the Phil Heath Classic. I was a little bit disappointed the night before at the athletes sort of registration. The other disabled bodybuilders hadn't turned up, so I'd phoned my wife and I was like, I've put all this effort in and I'm going to be on stage on my own. Sort of her words of wisdom were sort of, enjoy it. And little did I know that I'd done my own sort of posing routine, and the same person that had invited me over had organised for me to go on stage with Phil Heath. After my routine, in the evening, Phil Heath came and did his guest pose, and then on the microphone sort of invited me to join him up on stage, and that was phenomenal. I don't think my mouth's ever been so dry. Here I was sort of stood next to 7 times Mr. Olympia, one of the sort of best bodybuilders ever, and he knew me, and that was, the whole thing was just like a surreal experience. And then that led to me being invited to do a guest pose at Body Power on the pro stage, and being invited to other competitions. It was like, I've got an opportunity here to show what people with disabilities and amputations can do, because I wanted to use it as more than just my own experience, but a chance to hopefully sort of inspire other people. And then that sort of coincided with, there was an introduction to Disabled Strongman, like an open day in Kent, come along and try the events. And so the lad organising it said, why don't you come down? But I'll come down, I'll try it. But I went down. We'd tried a couple of the events. We tried the log press. We'd pulled a sled and stuff, and then we'd gone onto the stones. And for me, the stones are iconic, and it was like I've never actually seen one. Like, I hadn't been in a gym where there's an Atlas stone. It was like, I really want to get my hands on the stones. And so I'd sat in this wheelchair, like a reinforced one, and there was a couple of sort of 3-foot oil barrels either side, and there was a 50 kilo one to start, and you just had to take it from one side to the other, and it went over really easy. And they'd said, you've done this before. I was like, I've never touched one of these. I didn't have any tacky or anything, and I was like, I've just come to try it. And then I think the 70 went over, and then the 90, and they were like, do you want to try the 100? And at that time in Strongman, the heaviest Atlas stone in Disabled Strongman had been the 90 at the World's Strongest Disabled Man. And the reigning World's Strongest Disabled Man was there to give us pointers and tips and help us. And I was like, I'll try the 100. And it went over like so quick. And I think I raised a few eyebrows at that point, including my own. And the organiser said, look, Britain's is in 6 weeks' time, like, why don't you enter? And there were 23 in my class that day, so I thought, top 10, I'll be ecstatic. And I went and won my very first strongman competition, and within sort of 6 weeks of never touching an Atlas stone before, I was Britain's strongest disabled man. We'd had the first Arnold Classic to include Disabled Strongman that year in 2017. I loved testing myself against the best. I wanted to, again, learning curves all the time and watching them, and I always thought, I'm only going to better myself by being around the best people. And I won the first Arnold Classic. Later that year, I'd set a world record at Brands Hatch for pulling 2 racing trucks at the same time. And then 2018, I went over to the Arnolds again, and that was when I really felt like a strongman. Then I was almost 20 stone in body weight. I was doing the events 3-4 days a week. I'd just become, that was my purpose now. I'd won 4 out of the 5 events at the Arnolds that year, and I felt this is the year I can push to win the Worlds. I felt strong then. That's probably the first time in strongman where I feel strong. And then I was having a bit of a wobble in my personal life, and I was using it as fuel to do well in strongman. For those events, I would sort of take myself away for a couple of minutes before a truck pull and almost channel it all, and it paid dividends in strongman. But I was finding it harder and harder after each event to get my emotions back in check, I suppose. I just found myself sort of getting to a point where I was due to go to Norway to do the Worlds in 2018, but I was finding myself just sort of sitting in my garage where all my stuff was, all my kit, and just sitting there. So where I'd said one of the lads in Canada had clamped off my artery, and that was ultimately what kept me alive. We became sort of really close afterwards. And then 2 weeks after I won Britain's in 2016, he took his own life. It was like sort of losing a father figure, I suppose. Like he was a bit older than me, and like I just looked up to him. He'd almost become a bit of a hero of mine. Like without him, I wouldn't be here, and obviously the other lads as well. But I just felt a bit more of a connection to him. But after his funeral, I just buried it, and it was like, I'll use this as fuel. I'll do his memory justice and his family sort of proud through Strongman. And then I was starting to struggle where I was putting weight on. It was hindering my leg a lot more, and I had an operation, like an exploratory one, like a clinical trial on my sciatic nerve, which had it worked would have completely numbed my leg and probably wouldn't have mattered how much I weighed. It wouldn't have put any extra pressure on the leg. But out of the 30 people that had it, mine was the one that didn't work, and it made it worse. So I was getting heavier because obviously when it came to pulling 2 trucks, weighing nearly 20 stone was a massive advantage, but day-to-day living, it was sort of anything but. And then I just come 2018, it was about 4 weeks before I was due to go to Norway for the Worlds, and we were in Florida on holiday, and it all just caught up with me, and I'd been having a lot of thoughts which I'd kept to myself. I'd kept a lot of it to myself, and sort of not wanting to be here anymore. Daily sort of thoughts of sort of ending, doing exactly what Spence did. And I sort of poured it all out to my wife on the dream family holiday that I felt like I'd ruined, because at that point I couldn't wear a prosthetic anymore. I was in a wheelchair. I contacted someone from my regiment and I said, like, this is where I'm at. So I dropped out of Norway and I started having counselling, and at that point I sat with my wife and we wrote a list of positives and negatives, things I missed, things I still wanted to do, things I wanted to achieve. And one of the things that kept coming up was, like, I really missed the social aspect of the army and football. The football thing had never really gone away. I'd started to lose weight and have the counselling, and that really, I got a lot more off my chest than what maybe I thought I would. And I'd had some treatment done on my leg. I'd had some Botox in the leg, which did numb the leg and enabled me to then be on it to start losing weight. And then once I'd lost enough weight, I'd got involved in football, and one good turn sort of led to another, and so things started to look up. So that was what sort of led me into football, was just the need to sort of be around people and be a sociable person again. I'd turned down a lot of social events and stuff because it was like, well, I've got truck pulling tomorrow, or I've got stones on Tuesday. Like, I can't miss a session because I've got the Arnolds coming up, and so I'd almost put everyone to one side because I'd become obsessed with I have to become the world's strongest. And once I'd got to a weight light enough to be on crutches, I'd actually asked a local walk-in football club if I could just join in. I'll train with like some over 50s and might be a bit more my pace. And then as my confidence grew on crutches, what started off as a social thing inevitably turned to, can I take this further? And that's when I started to look into the amputee football. And I'd contacted Peterborough United's amputee football team and just sort of said, I'd like to come along and watch, basically, and sort of learn a bit about it. So I'd been invited, this was January 2019, to go along. They had a fixture at Arsenal, so I went down with the intentions of watching, and they had a shortage of players, and I found myself thrown straight in and playing. And it was very apparent that on the team photo, I think I was the same width as the 2 lads next to me. And that was a huge learning curve. Where the bodybuilding started with a win and the strongman started with a win, I was very much like the bottom of the pile in football. So my first 2 seasons I played with Peterborough United, and I've always sort of been honest with myself. a lot of Peterborough United play in the Premiership in terms of amputee football, and they can do things on a pair of crutches with a football that I didn't think were possible, and I felt that I would get more out of football to drop down to the Championship, the division below. And I'd played against West Brom the last couple of seasons. You could see the togetherness and the sense of humour and everything like that through on the sidelines, you know, when they're sort of warming up, and it just looked like, being from the outside looking in, I was like, I want to be a part of that. They looked like a really good group, and I loved when you played against them, there was no egos, they just worked hard as a team. I like a little bit of just modesty and hard work, and every single lad at West Brom has got that. They've got the talent to go with it, but they all work hard for each other, and so playing against them, it was like, I'm envious of what they've got. I want to be a part of that. One of the things that I took away from counselling was to find a positive out of every day, to achieve something positive every single day, so that, you know, when you go to bed, you've done something good in the day, and that will sort of roll into the next day and so on. Whereas I was almost in 2018 sort of in free fall of, I'd put my leg on, it'd be pain, and it would get more painful, and in my own time and my own company, my mind would sort of going in not very nice places. Whereas, yeah, to have the football and to be around those lads and to be looking forward, and so I've always been conscious since of putting a positive spin on whatever I can. And with the lockdown, it was like, right, well, the football stopped, but what else can I do, like, to make this a positive thing? And so I wanted to come back as more of an asset for the team, and so I've lost 8 kilos since Christmas. So I dieted how I did in bodybuilding. I've been out every day on my crutches doing cardio, and it's like, I want to come out the other side of this lockdown a better person and a better player. So it was nice to go back, and yeah, the lads sort of see the hard work, and I think that whole leading by example thing, I've come back and sort of shown that I've put the effort in the last few months, and I hope that brings the other lads up to that level as well. Like, he's done it, so he's done it for the sake of the team, so like, I've got no excuse.